17th of February 2026. Dear Headteacher, designated safeguarding lead, and school staff. This correspondence accompanies an important safeguarding notice addressed directly to parents and carers. As educational institutions entrusted with children's welfare, schools occupy a unique position of assumed trust, particularly when acting as intermediaries between families and safeguarding information. The attached parental letter concerns children's online exposure, digital exploitation risks, and long-term psychological well-being, matters that fall squarely within existing safeguarding and duty of care obligations. You are respectfully but firmly requested to distribute the attached letter to all parents and carers without delay. Ensure the communication is not withheld, summarised, or editorialised. Record the date and method of distribution for safeguarding transparency. Once schools are in receipt of this information, continued non-distribution may reasonably be interpreted as withholding material safeguarding information relevant to pupil welfare. This notice is not political, disciplinary, or adversarial in nature. It is preventative. It exists so that parents are made aware of foreseeable risks affecting children in modern digital environments, risks which schools, families, and safeguarding professionals are increasingly encountering in practice. A register of notified institutions will be maintained to ensure accountability and to allow families to verify that safeguarding information has been shared appropriately. Your cooperation ensures that parents cannot claim ignorance of known risks. Children's welfare remains central. Schools are protected through transparency and timely action. Thank you for acting promptly and responsibly in the best interests of the children entrusted to your care. Yours sincerely, Kaylee Ainov, founder of Umbrella Grape Solutions. UGS Common Law Church Limited 16246006. 17th of February 2026. Dear Parent Carer, this letter is shared with you in the interests of child welfare, safeguarding, and informed consent. Many parents today are navigating a digital environment that did not exist when current safeguarding frameworks were designed. Social media platforms now function not only as communication tools, but as broadcast, monetization, and data harvesting systems, often involving children, whether intentionally or inadvertently. It is important to state clearly and without judgment. Children cannot meaningfully consent to being used in monetized online content, to having their personal lives documented publicly, or to having a permanent digital footprint created on their behalf. Over recent years, growing evidence has emerged showing that children featured regularly in online content may experience foreseeable and long-term impacts, including, but not limited to, loss of privacy and autonomy, identity confusion between authentic self and performed self, anxiety, shame, or distress linked to public scrutiny, strained family relationships arising later in adolescence or adulthood, psychological harm that may not surface until years after exposure. These outcomes are well documented, predictable, and increasingly recognized within legal, educational, and safeguarding settings. As children reach adulthood, many are now beginning to question, and in some cases challenge, the use of their image, labor, and personal experiences for financial or reputational gain by others. This includes potential claims not only against platforms, but also against adults who held a duty of care. This letter is not an accusation. It is an invitation to pause, reflect, and reassess. Parents and carers are encouraged to consider whether their child's presence online primarily serves adult needs or incentives, whether financial protections, boundaries, and consent mechanisms are truly in place, whether content shared today may affect a child's future well-being, relationships, or sense of safety. Where harm has already occurred, early acknowledgement and open dialogue are consistently shown to reduce long-term damage and repair trust. This notice is provided so that no family can later say they were not made aware of the risks, responsibilities, and emerging realities surrounding children and online content. Safeguarding begins with awareness. Thank you for taking the time to read and reflect on this information in the best interests of your child. With respect and care, Kaylee Ainov, founder of Umbrella Grape Solutions. UGS Common Law Church Limited 16246006. The 17th of February 2026. Overview: Foreseeable harm to children arising from monetized social media exposure. Purpose of this document. This document provides an objective overview of the foreseeable psychological, social, and developmental harms experienced by children who are exposed, featured, or monetized within social media and influencer ecosystems. It outlines the responsibilities of platforms, the risks to families, and the emerging legal landscape, based on established evidence from psychology, child development, media studies, and historical precedent. This overview is intended for general readership, including parents, educators, safeguarding professionals, policymakers, and institutions. Context: the digital environment children have been raised in. Over the past decade, social media platforms have evolved into complex commercial systems driven by engagement, visibility, and monetization. These platforms increasingly function as broadcasting environments, advertising and marketing pipelines, algorithmically driven attention economies, informal labor markets. Within this environment, children have frequently been included in content that generates revenue, social capital, or influence for adults, often without meaningful regulation, oversight, or long-term safeguarding structures. Foreseeability of harm. The risks associated with child exposure in entertainment and media are not new. Comparable harms have long been documented in child performance industries, reality television, competitive youth entertainment, child labor contexts. Psychological and safeguarding research has consistently identified that prolonged exposure, performance pressure, loss of privacy, and adult financial dependency on a child's image or behavior present significant developmental risks. The transition of these dynamics into social media environments occurred without equivalent safeguards, despite the risks being well understood. Key areas of foreseeable psychological impact. 1. Identity development. Children exposed to monetized or audience-driven environments are at heightened risk of confusion between authentic identity and performed identity. Conditional self-worth based on approval metrics, likes, views, comments. Difficulty separating personal value from public reception. Identity formation is particularly vulnerable during childhood and adolescence, and persistent public scrutiny can distort this process. 2. Autonomy and consent. Children cannot meaningfully consent to permanent digital records, commercial exploitation of their image or personality, long-term reputational consequences. Repeated exposure can normalize boundary violations and undermine a child's sense of bodily, emotional, and narrative autonomy. 3. Attachment and family dynamics. Monetized child visibility can disrupt family relationships through role reversal, where children feel responsible for adult income or success. Loss of trust when boundaries are not respected. Resentment emerging later in life as awareness increases. Even in loving households, financial or reputational dependence on a child's presence creates ethical and emotional strain. 4. Mental health outcomes. Documented and predictable outcomes include anxiety and hypervigilance, depression and emotional dysregulation, dissociation or detachment, shame, grief, or delayed anger in later adolescence or adulthood. These effects may not emerge immediately and are often reported years after exposure ends. 5. Social development and peer relationships. Children with permanent or widely circulated online records may experience peer alienation or bullying, difficulty forming relationships outside performative roles, loss of control over personal narratives. The permanence of digital content removes the natural ability to outgrow past stages of development. Platform design and systemic responsibility. Social media platforms are intentionally designed to maximize engagement and emotional response, reward visibility and frequency of posting, encourage oversharing through algorithmic incentives, monetize personal and family life. These design choices significantly increase the risk of child exploitation and psychological harm. Platforms have historically failed to implement sufficient safeguards, despite being aware of child participation and profit generation. Emerging legal landscape. As awareness increases and children reach legal adulthood, claims are expected to arise based on failure of duty of care, negligent platform design, psychological injury from prolonged exposure, financial exploitation without protection, inability to consent to participation. These claims are grounded in established legal principles of foreseeability and preventable harm. Preventative and protective measures. Evidence-based protective actions include limiting or ending monetized child content, removing identifying or intimate content where possible, separating adult income from child presence, establishing financial protections for any past earnings, prioritizing child consent, privacy, and well-being. Early acknowledgement and corrective action significantly reduce long-term harm and relational damage. Conclusion. The harms associated with monetized child exposure on social media were foreseeable, avoidable, and preventable. The absence of regulation and safeguards has placed children at risk across psychological, social, and developmental domains. This issue is systemic rather than individual. Addressing it requires collective responsibility, informed decision-making, and a shift toward child-centered digital safeguarding. A second email will follow, with my own personal story, a digital psychological hell on earth without a break for 8+ years. This is not for sympathy or fame. I never wanted to be the center of attention, and I always rooted for my abusers that they would see the error of their ways and repent themselves before things potentially get dangerous for them or their families. They have intentionally and sadistically destroyed my life, denying my children their mother, and over many years of being ignored and left to fend for myself, I have had to evolve into a fierce online persona as a necessary armor to survive the lawless space. I am a natural performance artist, so in this arena, being silenced and abused around the clock, I had to make use of that skill to survive the relentless abuse and smear. I have recorded it all, and we are now witnessing the social media platforms being held to account for their liability in the mess they have created and the disastrous effect this has already had on our children. This podcast was released this week and covers so much of this issue from an up-to-date and professional perspective, containing much practical advice that can assist families immediately, and plenty of optimism and examples of how we already are addressing this phenomenon on a global scale. The internet is, after all, a global space. I am a problem solver and a risk assessment extraordinaire by nature. I am not the character I have been portrayed as by this network of trolls and smear merchants, or the one you will see under duress and living through perpetual trauma and attack, but nobody wants to see. I cannot imagine having to deal with anything like this as a child. Please protect your children, there are predators everywhere, especially online. A second email will follow. Many thanks and kind regards. Kaylee Ainov, founder of Umbrella Grape Solutions. UGS Common Law Church Limited 16246006.